It is the Lost Spirits Distillery in the Salinas area. I believe it might be Prunedale. And we have the whiskey maker himself, Bryan Davis, on the line to talk a little bit about it. Hey, Bryan.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. I should be asking you that question. Nicole and I should be asking how you're doing, because I understand yesterday was a bottling day and you may have put in like 20 hours.
No, worse. I actually haven't slept yet.
Oh,
well, thanks for being here.
well, you're going to be super loopy, and it has nothing to do with the whiskey.
Yeah, no, it's not so much the bottling factor. It's that when we built the distillery, we made this thing on such a nano budget that we got this little tiny boiler that's not really big enough for the still, and so it works fine, but it just takes 28 hours.
Wow.
And so you were at it the whole time, and nice enough to join us this morning to talk about your, I guess it's the Leviathan 2 is your most recent release?
That's the current one.
And then what's right now in the process?
Well, we've got a whole bunch of different stuff in the works. Probably the next release that you're going to see from us is made from California peat.
Oh, California peat, because the peat that you used for Leviathan 2 is from Canada, if I have that correct, right?
Yeah, it's actually from a bog just north of Edmonton.
Oh.
So that's kind of our whole thing, right, is that if you are into peated whiskeys, there's really only two varietals that are used in general production. So there's either the island coastal peat from Islay in Scotland, or there's heather peat, which comes from the higher elevations in Scotland. And so we sort of looked at this and said, well, gosh, we're in California. We have no traditions or rules. What would be interesting, and the first thing that popped to mind was, well, what about peats from different bogs that, have different flavor characteristics that you've never had before?
Yeah. Do we have bogs in California?
We do, actually. They're really hard to get to because most of them are protected environmental preserves.
Oh, okay.
And so initially we wanted to do a California one first, but it was a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of headache trying to find access to a bog that we could actually get peat out of and then burn it.
But you do use California grains in your previous previous spirits. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, we do. Not for all of them, but a considerable portion is California grown barley.
That is so cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the farm to table aspect.
So we see here it's explained as completely unique and undeniably geeky. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, so I guess if I was going to give you a definition, okay. So when you burn peat, it turns into phenolic acids. So, okay, rewind for a second. So the process of making whiskey is a process of making alcohol like it is with any other spirit, and then there are acids that are generated by either A, bacteria, or B, yeast in the fermentation.
Okay.
And then those acids are what make alcohol burn.
I
right?
see. Uh-huh.
So whenever you tasted like a kind of rot gut whiskey and it just burned all the way down, that was raw, unchanged acids.
So the good spirit maker finds a way to sort of neutralize those acids?
Well, you actually convert them into esters. So when they bond with alcohol molecules, they form something called an ester, which is what gives everything its flavor. So when you bite into a strawberry, you're tasting, for example, ethyl butyrate makes strawberries taste like strawberries. And that's a combination of butyric acid, which is actually a horrible, nasty, vile-tasting acid, combined with ethanol forms strawberries.
If you try any of the Belgian wheat beers using the Belgian-style process, it has a little bit of a banana taste, and that comes also from the esters, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That's actually, I believe ethyl heptanate is the primary one that produces the bananas. But yeah, it's also what gives a banana its flavor in nature, right? So all those different flavors are derived from what's called carboxylic acids, which make the fruit flavors when they're formed into esters, which is the barrel aging process. That's what makes the barrel aging magic work.
Are you starting to get the geek portion,
Yeah.
Nicole?
Yeah. So when you burn peat, it generates phenolic acids, which are a different family, and that's what makes anything taste smoky. So when you're getting a piece of smoked meat, you're tasting phenolic acids that are on the surface of the meat.
Uh-huh.
No.
And those can esterify as well.
And so you smoke the peat yourself, right?
Correct. And so that's sort of our geeky portion. That actually wasn't the geeky part. The geeky part is that when we burn different peats from different sources, at different temperature ranges, we produce a different cocktail of phenolic acids than you would get from the typical peat sources. And so that ends up estrifying into a whole new range of flavors, and you get new stuff that you literally have never tasted in a whiskey before.
So on the website, I see there's photos of a peach, chocolate, coffee, it looks like maple syrup, and honey. So is that a part of that process, or how does that get into the flavors?
So most of that, so the peach is a carboxylic acid-derived flavor. So that's your more typical path to getting a flavor into a whiskey. The chocolate is caffeic acid, which is generated from burning the peat. And it's a really unique flavor because chocolate and coffee are not typical whiskey flavors, especially not in the density that we get, and that's unique to that peat source. So in some of our other whiskeys that are going to come out in the future, you won't see that particular one. That's unique to that Canadian peat bog.
So you don't actually use those ingredients. Those are just examples of the chemicals that may produce those flavors.
You got it.
Okay. And then one thing that you do is you use California wine barrels and you char them yourself for aging, correct?
Yeah, we do. And we get some pretty cool and strange exotic ones because we're so small. I mean, we're probably realistically the smallest whiskey distillery, I think, in the world.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally, 3 people in a barrel a week. And so as a consequence, you can get barrels that don't make economic sense for a big distillery.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Like we did the whole Leviathan 1 series were done in late harvest Cabernet barrels, which, I mean, there's probably maybe 25 barrels a year produced, in California, period.
And so, Bryan, what is the reasoning behind burning or charring the inside of the barrel? Wouldn't that sort of remove the flavors that would have existed there from the late harvest Cabernet?
Well, it changes them. So it does 2 things. So the first thing is that when you char it, it'll caramelize the wine because the late harvest Cabernet is a sweet dessert wine. And so some of the residual sugars that are left in the wine will actually get caramelized on the surface of the wood. And the second thing it does is it actually burns the wood, which this gets really geeky. So when you char wood in a barrel, so if you just took whiskey and you put it in a barrel that wasn't charred and sat it out to age, literally nothing would happen.
Oh.
The wood is made up of 2 polymers, lignin and hemicellulose, and those polymers are made of interlaced carboxylic and phenolic acids, respectively. And so when you char them, it breaks apart the polymer, and then when you put the whiskey in, those acids that came from the charred wood end up forming or actually catalyzing and triggering the aging process. And so it's a critical step, actually.
I see on your website it says that it's bottled with a do not chill filter. Does that mean just what it says, or what does that say?
Well, so chill filtering is a really common practice in the whiskey industry, where what they'll do is take the whiskey and then freeze it to like negative 30 degrees and then run it through a filter. And that causes compounds called colloids, which can make a whiskey hazy. And so when you chill it down that low, the colloids come out of suspension, you run it through a filter, and it catches them, and it makes the whiskey crystal clear. The problem with that is that the colloids actually taste really good and add body to the whiskey. And so for kind of our really geeky customers, which is basically the only customers who've ever heard of us, the colloids in the whiskey are desirable. And so they actually want to know that it hasn't been chill filtered and that it has that extra flavor, even if it makes the whiskey slightly hazy. And in our case, we don't filter it at all. We actually rack the barrels, so we just let them sit slowly. Everything settles to the bottom, and then we draw off the bottom of the barrel.
We are speaking with whiskey maker Bryan Davis, Lost Spirits in Monterey County. You're in Prunedale, right?
Well, we're actually kind of in between Moss Landing and Salinas, but much closer to Moss Landing.
Okay, right.
We're sort of hidden in the middle of the agricultural fields where nobody expects us.
Where the geeks hide out to make their whiskey. It's well known in those circles. Bryan, if you don't mind holding on, I know you have no sleep or anything, but if you don't mind holding on through the commercial break, I just have a couple of more questions for you.
Sure.
All right, we're speaking again with Bryan Davis. Very good Sunday Fun Day morning, everyone. The final segment of the Eat, Drink, Explore Radio Network for this March the 3rd. I'm your host, Randall White, joined by Nicole Powers.
Good morning.
And when we last left you, we were speaking with Bryan Davis. He is an artisanal whiskey maker out of Monterey County. He's the man behind Lost Spirits, has been up for an entire day plus, and still joins us this morning because yesterday was a big day at the Lost Spirits there. What exactly were you doing yesterday, Bryan?
Well, we were bottling up a couple of casks, and we were also distilling the first run from a new distillation, which is a really long process.
You're like, really long.
I have to do this once a week, so I'm getting used to it, but
right.
It's painful.
The life of a whiskey maker, or the smallest in the world, yes. He says. Now, you had a question, Nicole, regarding the style of their whiskey.
I did. Bryan, excuse Randall and I, as we are obviously not as familiar with whiskey as you are. It says you're inspired by Islay, and we don't know what Islay is. So.
Yeah.
So much so that we're not even pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah.
Well, don't worry about it. It's Scottish, so no one will ever pronounce it correctly. You could actually go there, pronounce it correctly, and then they'll correct you and give you a different pronunciation just to have fun with you. I mean, Islay is an island in Scotland that is very well known for its heavily peated whiskeys.
Ah, okay.
And so the smokiest of the single malt scotches come from that island. And when we got into this, originally we were living in Spain with the distillery there, and we ended up selling it, I guess, about 4.5 years ago or something. And when we did, we had a distributor who was a Scotch importer, and we sat down with him and did a flight of all of the different whiskeys that he was importing, and there was one in there called Octomore that's the most heavily smoked whiskey in the world, arguably. And Joanne and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And so years later, when we came back to the United States and we were setting up the distillery here, we were originally going to make American whiskeys. And we were tasting all these different whiskeys and talking about the different prototypes that we were making, and we just really weren't in love with any of them.
Uh-huh.
And a friend who was over, who was getting really mad at us because he thought one of the bourbons we had made was really great, and we didn't like it that much.
I'm a bourbon fan, too.
And so he was kind of looked at us and went, well, what do you want? And we both looked at each other and, without thinking about it, both said Octomore at the same time.
Oh, well, then that's it.
There you go.
Yeah, so we're like, okay, we're going to do that. Let's go for heavily smoked, Scotch-style whiskeys, but made from unusual ingredients.
I like it. I love it. I love the whole concept behind your distillery there in Monterey County. And Bryan, not to get too far off topic, where in Spain did you live?
Outside of Barcelona. So we lived in the Pyrenees, about, I guess, 2 hours.
Beautiful.
I guess 2 hours up towards the French border and moving inland from the coast.
Now, I have a question for you regarding a little bit of controversy that's been in the news lately, not regarding your whiskey, but regarding Maker's Mark. They apparently could not make enough, so they decided, well, when you can't make enough, water it down.
Yeah, I mean...
What was up with that? That just seems like an incredibly bad marketing move.
It's such a foreign concept for us because we don't even water the whiskey down at all.
Uh-huh.
We just take it straight out of the barrels and put it into the bottles as is. And so I can't really relate. But then again, we're not, the kind of business they are. We don't do millions and millions of barrels all over the world and have, thousands of employees we have to worry about.
And so. You're the exact type of whiskey maker that will be on display at the Whiskeys of the World. Is that considered a competition? What's it considered?
No, they have these actually all over the United States and really the world, where you can go and you can spend maybe $120 or $150 and walk through a conference hall and sample all of the different and interesting whiskeys that you might otherwise have to spend, tens of thousands of dollars to get a complete flight of samples to decide what you like and what you don't.
Right.
And so it's a great experience for a consumer, both whiskey geeks and people who are new to it, because for $120 you can walk in and try, literally 24 different exotic and special whiskeys. Nice. And sort of identify your tastes, because there's a lot of styles.
I've been and I love it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic experience.
If you're not able to attend Whiskeys of the World, how can we purchase your whiskey, since it is such a Lost Spirits is so small?
Yeah, sometimes that's challenging because it's sold out more or less 2/3 of the time, and then we kind of resupply one of the markets, and so it's sort of like you can get it. Online is the best place for sure, because a lot of times you'll run into a situation where California is sold out, but you can get it in New York, And then the month after that, New York is sold out, and you can get it in Chicago. And then the month after that, Chicago's sold out, and you can get it in California.
Right.
But the best place in the Bay Area is K&L Wines.
K&L Wines?
Yeah, it's a fantastic shop for both exotic wines and whiskeys. They have a phenomenal selection.
And where are they located?
They're in Redwood City and also Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Oh, okay. So 3 different locations, 2 in the Bay Area. That's
yeah, and they'll often buy full barrels from us, so they tend to keep more stock than most stores do at any given moment. I think they're sold out today, but there should be some there later in the week.
He laughs. Considering how much love and effort and geekiness and high quality ingredients go into this, including everything down to the late vintage Cabernet barrels that you char and use. I can't imagine a bottle of this is considered a bargain bottle, right?
Well, I mean, it is kind of for what it is, I guess. I mean, it's they sell for about $55 a bottle.
Oh, that is a good deal. I thought you were going to say more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we wanted to keep the pricing reasonable. I mean, because I don't want people to buy these and collect them and, sell them at auctions. We want people to buy them and drink them,
Good. Yeah.
I like that idea.
Right, I love that idea.
We still have to pay the bills, so it's not super cheap, but,
Right.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, Bryan, it's such a pleasure to have you on. The jury's still out on whether I can make it to the event up in San Francisco, but the organizers have invited us, as they do every single year. And
we'd love to see you.
Yeah, I will make a beeline over to your kiosk, or what do you call that, table serving area. It's really
I don't know what we're gonna get. Yeah,
it's really lined up. I mean, it is jam packed with people pouring things, and they also have food on board the ship, which is really nice. And then on top, I don't know if they're doing it this year, but they have like where you can sample cigars and stuff, which is why they do it on the ship, because San Francisco has rules against that. But if you're on the ship, then you
Doesn't matter.
Get around that.
Yeah, we're actually going to be the one of the whiskeys they're pairing the cigars with. I'm an avid cigar smoker.
Oh,
so,
well, then there you go. Yeah, it's
we jumped all over that.
Well, Bryan Davis, whiskey maker, artisanal whiskey maker, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Everyone kind of says it a little differently.
Artisanal.
Technically, it's
I'm
not
not
even
sure
an
there's a
English
right
word.
word.
Yeah, so it's from France. Lost Spirits there. It's secretly located between Moss Landing and Salinas in an undisclosed location.
Agricultural area.
Right. Bryan, go to bed.
All right.
Tell your wife
so
thank
much.
you as well for helping us set this up. So.
You got it. We'll do.
All right, everyone, that wraps it up for another Eat, Drink, Explore radio program.